Okay, so get this. We're diving into historic homes, affordable housing, and like how those two can work together.
Mm,
It sounds kind of tricky, right?
yeah.
We'll see. You've given me some research about a neighborhood in Baltimore
hmm
called Butcher's Hill, and it's a real case study from back in the late 20th century.
Yeah, Butcher's Hill is fascinating
Okay.
because it's full of these beautiful old row houses.
Yeah.
And it kind of became a battleground between people who wanted to like revitalize the area and those who were worried about people being pushed out.
So like a tug of war between, fixing up the old
Yeah.
and keeping things affordable.
Exactly. And this wasn't just a Baltimore thing. Back
Uh,
in 1991, a whopping 58% of low-income renters
Wow.
across the U.S. were spending more than a third of their income on rent.
Okay.
So the need for affordable housing was a huge issue nationwide.
Wow, that puts things in perspective.
Yeah.
It sounds like Butcher's Hill was right in the middle of this whole storm.
Absolutely. Now, there were two main players in this story.
Okay.
The Southeast Community Organization,
Mm-hmm.
or SECO,
Okay.
and Jubilee Baltimore.
Good.
SECO was all about revitalization,
Mm-hmm.
restoring those historic homes and attracting new residents.
That sounds like a good thing, right?
Yeah,
Bringing new life into a neighborhood.
it was, but there was a catch.
Uh-huh.
As SECO started fixing up homes and property values went up,
Yeah.
a lot of longtime residents, including a good number of Lumbee Native Americans,
Oh, wow.
started getting priced out.
Oh, I see where this is going.
Yeah.
It's that classic gentrification problem.
Mm-hmm.
Making things nicer often ends up pushing out the people who are already there.
You got it. And that's where Jubilee Baltimore comes in.
Right.
They were all about creating affordable housing,
Uh-huh.
and they really pushed back against this displacement trend.
Okay.
They fought to buy properties and turn them into affordable homes, often for the very people who were being forced out.
So you had these two groups, both trying to improve the neighborhood, but with very different approaches. That must created some tension.
It did, but it also led to something pretty unique.
Oh.
A mixed income community.
Huh.
Butcher's Hill ended up with a mix of young professionals, longtime residents, and lower income folks all living side by side.
Okay, but how did Jubilee Baltimore actually pull that off? I
Yeah.
mean, buying property takes money,
Mm-hmm.
especially when you're competing with people who can afford, those fancy renovated homes.
That's where things get really interesting.
Oh.
They used a strategy involving federal tax credits.
Oh.
And it's something a lot of people don't even know about.
Tax credits.
Yeah.
How does that help with affordable housing and historic preservation?
Well, there's this program called the Low Income Housing Tax Credit,
Mm-hmm.
or LHTC.
Okay.
It basically gives investors a break on their taxes if they put money into projects that create affordable housing.
So it incentivizes developers to build affordable housing.
Right.
That's pretty clever.
And there's another program called the Historic Rehabilitation Tax Credit, or HRTC.
Okay.
This one gives tax credits to people who restore historic buildings.
Wait, so you can actually get a tax break for saving old buildings?
You bet. And here's the kicker.
What?
You can use both of these tax credits together.
Hold on, this is blowing my mind.
Uh-huh.
You're telling me Jubilee Baltimore could restore these historic homes and make them affordable using tax breaks?
Exactly. It's like history giving the future a financial boost.
Wow.
They took old convents and row houses and, using these tax credits, turned them into affordable apartments.
That is so cool. It's like a win-win for everyone, the buildings, the developers, and the people who need affordable housing.
It was a pretty ingenious strategy by 1990. Butcher's Hill had become this fascinating mix of people,
Yeah.
all thanks to the efforts of these two very different organizations.
Yeah.
They literally shaped the neighborhood.
Okay, but this sounds almost too good to be
Mm.
true.
Yes.
If these tax credits are so great, why isn't everyone using them?
Right.
What's the catch?
Well, it's not as simple as just filling out a form and getting a check.
Right.
These programs are complex,
Okay.
and it takes a lot of expertise to navigate the rules and regulations.
You need people who really know what they're doing.
You need people with vision and a deep understanding of real estate,
Yeah?
finance, and historic preservation.
Right.
It's not easy, but Butcher's Hill shows it can be done.
This is incredible. We're seeing how these different forces, community organizations, tax incentives, the desire to preserve the past,
Mm-hmm.
all came together to create something really unique in Butcher's Hill.
And it wasn't just about the buildings themselves. It was
No.
about the people who lived there.
Yeah.
Let's take a closer look at what that mix of incomes and backgrounds actually looked like in the neighborhood.
Okay, let's dive into the human side of this story.
Mm-hmm.
What did this mixed income community actually feel like for the people who lived there?
Well, to get a sense of that, we can look at data from the 1990 census.
Mhm.
One of the things that jumps out is the education levels in Butchers Hill.
Hmm.
They had a higher than average number of adults who hadn't finished high school,
Okay.
but also a higher than average number of college grads.
So it really was a mix of folks from different walks of life, not just,
Yeah,
one type of person being drawn to the neighborhood.
exactly. And when you look at income,
Oh.
it gets even more interesting.
Hmm.
The median household income was lower than the city average,
Okay.
but the median family income was actually higher.
Well, yeah, how does that work?
It tells us there was a blend of different types of households.
Okay.
You might have had individuals living on lower incomes, but also families where maybe both parents were working and earning more.
So it wasn't just about rich and poor.
Uh-huh.
It was more nuanced than that, a real community tapestry.
Right, and we see that reflected in the housing too.
Okay.
Butchers Hill had a higher vacancy rate than surrounding areas,
Mm-hmm.
but also a much higher rate of owner-occupied housing.
So more people actually owning their homes, even with those vacant properties in the mix.
Yes, which fits with the whole idea of Secco fixing up houses and Jubilee creating affordable options for people to buy.
Yeah.
It wasn't just rentals.
This is fascinating.
Yeah.
But we got to be honest. Was it all sunshine and roses?
Wow.
Were there any downsides to this whole experiment?
It's important to remember that while Jubilee was doing great work, people were still being displaced.
Right.
The 1990 census shows a higher percentage of kids living in poverty in Butchers Hill compared to the rest of Baltimore.
Okay.
And a significant number of elderly residents were below the poverty line, too.
So even with the best efforts, some folks still slip through the cracks.
It's tough.
Yeah.
There's no magic wand solution that helps everyone perfectly.
Right.
But Butchers Hill shows that with the right approach, you can at least create a more balanced and inclusive outcome
Right.
than if you just let gentrification run wild.
It seems like a constant balancing act, trying to revitalize without pushing people out.
Absolutely, and it raises questions about the role of the city government in all this.
Yeah.
We've talked about tax credits,
Uh-huh.
but could they have done more to directly support affordable housing or prevent displacement?
Yeah, like where does the responsibility lie?
Right.
Is it all on community organizations like Jubilee,
Mm-hmm.
or does the city have a bigger role to play?
That's a big debate.
Okay.
Some people think the government should be more hands-on, setting stricter rules for development and providing more funding for affordable housing.
Others probably think it should be left to the free market to sort out.
Right. It's a complex issue with no easy answers.
Yeah.
But Butchers Hill gives us a real-life example of how those different forces, the private sector community groups and the government, all interact and shape a neighborhood's future.
And it sounds like Jubilee Baltimore was really key in pushing back against those market forces that can sometimes leave people behind.
Definitely, they showed that you don't have to just accept gentrification as inevitable.
Right.
There are ways to fight for affordability and create a more equitable outcome.
Okay, but let's zoom out for a second.
Okay.
All this data paints a picture of Butchers Hill in 1990.
Yeah.
But what about the long-term impact?
Right.
Did this mix of incomes actually create a true community, or did people mostly stick to their own groups?
That's the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
The census data can only tell us so much.
Right.
It doesn't reveal the day-to-day life in Butchers Hill
Right.
or how much people from different backgrounds actually interacted.
So we need more than just numbers to understand what it was really like to live there.
Exactly. We'd need firsthand accounts, maybe interviews with residents to get a sense of whether there was a genuine sense of community or if it was more like separate enclaves.
Yeah.
Did the kids from different income levels play together?
Right.
Did neighbors help each other out?
Right.
Those are the things that make a community thrive.
It makes you wonder if anyone studied that aspect of Butchers Hill in more depth.
I'm sure there's more to uncover. And it would be fascinating to see if other cities have tried similar approaches to creating mixed income communities and what lessons they've learned.
You know, it's striking how this one neighborhood story
Yeah.
opens up so many bigger questions about how our cities develop and who benefits from that development.
Butchers Hill really is a microcosm of the challenges and possibilities facing urban areas across the country. It shows us that revitalization doesn't have to equal displacement,
Right.
and that creative solutions can emerge when different groups work together toward a common goal.
It's inspiring, but also a bit daunting.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, these are complex issues with no easy answers.
Absolutely. But that's what makes it so important to dive into these stories,
Yeah.
to learn from the past and to use that knowledge to build a better future for our communities.
Speaking of learning, I'm curious.
Uh,
Did Seco and Jubilee Baltimore ever see eye to eye?
hmm.
Did their relationship change over time as the neighborhood evolved?
That's a great question and something I wish we had more information on. It'd be fascinating to know how those organizations interacted,
Yeah.
maybe even collaborated as Butcher's Hill evolved.
It makes you think about the human element in all of this.
Right.
We've got the data, the policies, the economics,
Mm-hmm.
but ultimately it's people who make a community.
Exactly. And that brings us back to you, the listener.
Okay.
What does all of this mean for your own community?
Right. We've been deep in Butcher's Hill,
Yeah.
but this isn't just a Baltimore story.
Right.
These are issues playing out all over the place.
Think about your own city or town. Are there neighborhoods facing similar pressures?
Yeah.
Maybe areas with historic buildings, rising property values, and concerns about affordability.
I bet a lot of people listening can relate to that, even if it's not exactly the same situation.
And the Butcher's Hill story gives us some things to think about.
Okay.
First, it highlights the importance of being aware of what's happening in your community.
Okay.
Pay attention to development projects, changes in housing costs, and whether longtime residents are being displaced.
So it starts with being informed, with keeping our eyes open.
Right, knowledge is power.
Yeah.
Once you understand the situation, you can start to think about what can be done.
Like, what are some practical steps people can take?
Yeah.
It can feel overwhelming, like one person can't make much of a difference.
There's actually a lot you can do.
Okay.
Support organizations that are working on affordable housing or historic preservation in your area.
Okay.
Go to community meetings.
Uh-huh.
Speak up about your concerns and contact your local officials.
So get involved. Make your voice heard. Don't just sit on the sidelines.
Exactly. And you can also explore ways to invest in projects that align with your values.
Okay.
Maybe there's a community land trust or a housing cooperative doing good work in your city.
So even if you don't have a lot of money, you can still put your resources where your heart is.
It's about finding ways to make a difference, big or small. And remember, change doesn't happen overnight. It takes time, persistence, and a lot of collaboration.
Butcher's Hill wasn't transformed in a day, and neither will our own communities be.
Right. It's a long game. But by being informed, getting involved, and supporting the right initiatives, we can help create more balanced and inclusive communities for everyone.
You know, I think that's what makes this deep dive so compelling.
Yeah.
It's not just an academic exercise.
Right.
It's a story about real people, real challenges, and the very real possibility of making things better.
Absolutely. And while there may not be easy answers, Butcher's Hill shows us that with a little ingenuity and a lot of hard work, we can find creative solutions
Yeah.
that balance historic preservation, affordable housing, and the needs of a diverse community.
It's a reminder that our cities are constantly evolving, and it's up to us, the citizens, to shape that evolution in a way that benefits everyone.
Well said, and who knows, maybe your community will become the next Butcher's Hill, a model for how to do things right.
That's a great thought to leave us with. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Butcher's Hill. We hope it sparked some ideas and inspired you to get involved in your own community. Until next time, keep learning, keep questioning, and keep pushing for a better future.